Today, we are going to discover the story of Max, the loyal protector from California. There's an old saying that dogs leave paw prints on our hearts, but the truth is far deeper than that. The bond between a human and their dog is one of life's purest forms of love, unconditional, unwavering, and it's a connection that transcends words, built instead on stolen glances, gentle touches, and the simple act of being present for one another. When we welcome a dog into our lives, we're not just gaining a pet, we're opening our hearts to a companion who will teach us about loyalty, joy, and the profound beauty of living fully in each moment. This is the story of one such bond, and the remarkable soul who made it possible. It was a warm April evening in Los Angeles when Max's story began with the family who would love him for the rest of his days. Sarah and Michael had been married for 3 years and had recently moved into a small house in the valley, with a backyard, the first they'd ever had. They'd talked about getting a dog for months, but life kept getting in the way. Then one Saturday, while driving home from the hardware store, Michael spotted something that made his heart sink. On the shoulder of the busy street, a medium-sized dog lay motionless near the curb, his golden brown fur matted with dirt. "Pull over," Sarah said urgently, already reaching for her phone. The dog, later to be named Max, had been struck by a car. His left hind leg was injured, and he was clearly in shock, but his dark eyes were alert, watching them with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. Sarah gently wrapped him in a blanket from their car, while Michael called the emergency vet. As they lifted him carefully into the back seat, Max did something remarkable. Despite his pain and terror, he licked Sarah's hand, a small gesture that would change all their lives forever. At the emergency animal hospital, the veterinarian examined Max thoroughly. He was, perhaps, 2 years old, with no microchip and no collar. His leg wasn't broken, thankfully, but badly bruised and sprained. He was dehydrated and underweight, suggesting he'd been on the streets for some time. The vet carefully cleaned his wounds, gave him fluids and pain medication, and said he'd need rest and care for several weeks. "What will happen to him?" Sarah asked, already knowing she couldn't bear to leave him behind. "Without an owner coming forward, he'll eventually go to the city shelter," the vet replied gently, "but he's a sweet boy. He's been through a lot, but he's a fighter." Michael and Sarah exchanged a look, one of those wordless conversations that only couples who truly know each other can have. They'd come into the vet's office as a couple, thinking about maybe getting a dog someday. They left as Max's family. The first night in their home, Max was understandably nervous. They'd set up a comfortable bed for him in the living room, with food and water nearby. As the evening grew late and they prepared for bed, Sarah found herself unable to leave him alone downstairs. She brought her pillow and a blanket down and settled on the couch near his bed. Around midnight, she woke to find Max had somehow, despite his injured leg, made his way onto the couch. He'd curled up against her side, his head resting on her lap, as if he'd been waiting his whole life for this moment of safety and warmth. His tail gave a small wag when he realized she was awake. In that quiet moment, lit only by the streetlight filtering through the curtains, Sarah understood something profound. Max hadn't just been rescued that day. In a way, they'd rescued each other. He'd shown them what they'd been missing, the unconditional love and purpose that only a dog can bring. Michael came downstairs the next morning to find them both still asleep. Max's paw stretched out to touch Sarah's arm, even in sleep. He snapped a photo, the first of thousands they would take over the years, and smiled. They'd saved a life yesterday, but looking at them now, he realized that life was about to save them right back, in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The name Max came naturally. As they nursed him back to health over the following weeks, his personality began to shine through. He was brave but gentle, playful but dignified, strong but incredibly tender. He was the maximum the best of everything a dog could be. When Sarah first said the name out loud, Max's ears perked up and his tail wagged enthusiastically, as if he'd recognized himself at last. Those early weeks established a pattern that would define their life together. Max was never far from his humans. He'd follow Sarah from room to room, a gentle shadow who just wanted to be near. When Michael worked from home, Max would lie at his feet under the desk, occasionally resting his chin on Michael's foot as if to say, "I'm here." During those healing weeks, as his leg grew stronger and his coat grew shinier with good food and love, Max transformed from a frightened, injured stray into a confident, joyful companion. But it was his protective nature that truly defined him. Even in those early days, recovering from his injuries, Max seemed to understand that he had a job to do. If someone knocked at the door, he'd position himself between Sarah and the entrance, not aggressively, but watchfully. If they went for short walks in the neighborhood during his recovery, he'd keep himself between them and the street, as if remembering all too well the danger that lurked there. The loyal protector wasn't just a name, it was who Max was, down to his very soul. The first memory that would become part of family legend happened about 6 months after Max joined the family. He'd fully recovered from his injuries and had filled out into a handsome dog with a lustrous coat and soulful brown eyes. Sarah's younger sister, Emma, was visiting from San Diego with her 3-year-old daughter, Lily. Emma had been nervous about bringing Lily around a dog she'd never met, despite Sarah's assurances that Max was gentle. Lily was shy at first, peeking at Max from behind her mother's legs. Max, seeming to understand the situation with the intuition that dogs possess, didn't rush to her. Instead, he lay down on the living room floor, making himself as small and non-threatening as possible. He rested his chin on his paws and waited, his tail giving occasional gentle wags. After about 10 minutes, curiosity got the better of Lily. She toddled over with a stuffed bunny in her hand and sat down about 2 feet from Max. For a long moment, they just looked at each other, the small child and the patient dog. Then Lily extended her bunny toward Max. "Doggy want?" she asked in her tiny voice. Max's response was perfect. He gently touched his nose to the bunny, gave it the softest lick, then looked back at Lily with what could only be described as a smile. Lily giggled a sound of pure delight and scooted closer. Within minutes, she was leaning against him, and Max had become a living pillow, barely moving so as not to disturb her. Emma had tears in her eyes as she took photos of her daughter and Max, now the best of friends. But the truly remarkable moment came later that afternoon. The family was in the backyard, Lily playing with a ball while the adults sat on the patio chatting. They didn't notice when Lily wandered toward the back gate, which had been left slightly ajar by the gardener earlier that day. Max noticed. He immediately got up and trotted to Lily, gently but firmly placing himself between her and the gate. He wouldn't let her pass, nudging her with his nose back toward the center of the yard. When Michael saw what was happening and went to secure the gate, Max wagged his tail, as if to say, "I've got this." From that day on, whenever Lily visited, she and Max were inseparable. He'd become not just her playmate, but her guardian angel, watching over her with a devotion that brought the whole family to tears more than once. Another memory that showcased Max's character came during the following winter, when Los Angeles experienced an unusual cold snap. Sarah had been fighting the flu and had spent 3 days in bed, miserable and exhausted. Max never left her side. He'd stationed himself on the floor next to the bed, only getting up to eat or go outside for the briefest of bathroom breaks. Michael would coax him downstairs for meals, but within minutes, Max would be back at his post. On the 3rd night, Sarah woke up feeling slightly better, but found she couldn't sleep. It was about 3 in the morning, and the house was quiet. Max was awake too, watching her in the dim light from the hallway. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, reaching down to stroke his head. "You don't have to stay here, you know. I'm okay." Max stood up, and for a moment Sarah thought he was going to leave. Instead, he did something he'd never done before. Very carefully, moving slowly as if asking permission, he climbed onto the bed. He curled up at her feet, his warmth and steady breathing like medicine. Sarah felt tears slide down her cheeks, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming love she felt for this dog who'd chosen to stand guard over her, who'd appointed himself her protector in sickness and in health. Max's intelligence and capacity for learning became evident when Michael decided to teach him some tricks. Michael had never trained a dog before, but Max made him look like an expert. Within 2 weeks, Max could sit, stay, lie down, roll over, and shake hands. But his favorite trick, the one that always made visitors laugh, was play dead. Michael would point his finger like a gun, say, "Bang," and Max would dramatically flop to his side, tongue lolling out, playing the part to perfection. But here's what made it special. After a few seconds of playing dead, Max would slowly open one eye to peek at his audience. If they were laughing and clapping, his tail would start to wag, even while he lay lifeless on the ground. He was a ham, and he knew it. The moment Michael said, "Okay, Max," he'd leap up and do a happy dance, proud of his performance. But beyond the entertaining tricks, Max learned something far more important. Sarah suffered from occasional anxiety attacks, and during one particularly difficult period, Max seemed to sense when one was coming on. He'd start pressing against her legs or nudging her hand before she even fully recognized what was happening. His solid presence and warm weight would ground her, giving her something real and immediate to focus on. Without any formal training, Max had become her therapy dog, her anchor in moments when the world felt too overwhelming. One of the family's favorite memories took place at the beach. Despite living in Los Angeles, Sarah and Michael didn't go to the ocean very often. But on Max's third gotcha day, the anniversary of the day they found him, they decided to take him to one of the dog-friendly beaches in Malibu. They'd never taken Max to the beach before and had no idea how he'd react to the ocean. At first, Max was cautious. The sound of the waves, the strange smells, the endless expanse of water, it was all new and slightly overwhelming. He stayed close to Sarah and Michael as they walked along the sand. But then a golden retriever ran past them, bounding into the waves with wild abandon, and something in Max awakened. His ears perked up, his tail began to wag, and before they could react, he took off running. Max hit the water at full speed, splashing through the shallow waves with pure, unbridled joy. He'd leap over the smaller waves, then chase them as they retreated back to sea. He'd run up and down the beach, occasionally circling back to check on Sarah and Michael, then race back to the water. His whole body expressed happiness, from his wide, panting smile to his constantly wagging tail to the spring in his step. They stayed at the beach for 3 hours that day. By the time they left, Max was exhausted, covered in sand, and wearing an expression of complete contentment. In the car on the way home, he fell asleep with his head on Sarah's lap, and she could swear he was smiling in his dreams. From that day on, beach trips became a regular adventure, and Max never lost that pure joy he discovered that first time he felt the ocean waves. Max's protective instincts showed themselves most clearly one evening in the fall of his 5th year with the family. Sarah had come home late from work, arriving after dark, something she rarely did. She was walking from her car to the front door when she noticed a man she didn't recognize standing on the sidewalk, seeming to watch the house. Her heart began to race with anxiety. Before she could reach the door, she heard barking deep, authoritative, completely unlike Max's usual friendly sounds. Michael had opened the door, and Max bounded out, immediately placing himself between Sarah and the stranger. He didn't attack or even approach the man, but his stance was clear. He was ready to protect his human at all costs. His hackles were raised, his body tense and alert, his eyes never leaving the stranger. The man quickly raised his hands. "I'm just lost," he explained. "Looking for an address." Michael gave him directions, and the man hurried on his way, clearly understanding that this dog meant business. The moment the stranger was gone, Max transformed back into his gentle self. Pressing against Sarah's legs and looking up at her with concern, as if checking to make sure she was okay. His tail wagged softly, and he followed her inside, staying close for the rest of the evening. That night, Sarah held him tight and whispered, "You really are my protector, aren't you, Max?" His response was to lick her cheek and rest his head on her shoulder, which, in Max's language, meant always. Daily life with Max was filled with countless smaller moments that became rituals. Every morning, no matter what time it was, Max would greet Michael and Sarah as if he hadn't seen them in years. His whole body would wiggle with excitement, and he de-grabbed his favorite toy, a worn-out rope that had somehow survived 5 years, and parade around the house with it. Proud as could be. This morning routine never got old. In fact, it became the highlight of their day, a reminder of what unconditional love looked like. Max had claimed the spot on the couch next to the window as his own, where he could watch the neighborhood. He knew the regular walking routes of every dog in the area, the schedule of the mail carrier, and which neighbors were most likely to offer treats. He'd observe the world with an air of dignified interest, occasionally offering a single woof at a passing squirrel, but mostly just content to watch life go by. In the evenings, after dinner, Max had a specific routine. He'd bring his leash to Michael, not for a walk, but as a signal that it was time for their nightly game of tug-of-war. They'd play for about 15 minutes, Max growling playfully but never too roughly, always aware of his own strength. Afterward, he'd settle on the floor between Sarah and Michael as they watched TV, usually resting his head on someone's foot, his way of staying connected even in rest. When Sarah and Michael decided to expand their family and Sarah became pregnant, they worried about how Max would adjust. But their concerns were unfounded. Max seemed to know something was different even before they did. He became even more gentle with Sarah, and as her pregnancy progressed, he'd rest his head on her growing belly, as if listening for the baby. When they brought baby Joshua home from the hospital, Max's tail wagged gently as he approached to investigate this tiny new human. From that moment on, Max extended his protective nature to include Joshua. He'd lie outside the nursery during nap times, a faithful guardian. When Joshua cried, Max would come get Sarah or Michael, leading them to the baby's room. As Joshua grew from infant to toddler, Max tolerated tiny hands pulling his ears and tail with patient grace, never once showing anything but gentleness toward the little boy who would become his best friend. Max lived to be 13 years old, 13 years of unwavering loyalty, boundless love, and countless moments of joy. As he entered his senior years, he slowed down, as all dogs eventually do. The beach runs became shorter walks, the games of tug-of-war more gentle, but the love in his eyes never dimmed. He developed arthritis in his hips, a common condition for dogs his age, and though he managed it well with medication and care, it was clear that his body was beginning to tire. In his final months, Max spent most of his time in his favorite spot by the window, still watching over his neighborhood, still keeping an eye on his family. Joshua, now 8 years old, would sit with him for hours, reading aloud from his schoolbooks, and Max would rest his graying muzzle on the boy's lap, content. The roles had reversed where, once Max had protected Joshua. Now Joshua was Max's gentle companion in his twilight days. One Saturday morning in late spring, Michael and Sarah woke to find Max struggling to stand. They knew, in the way that pet parents just know, that the time they'd been dreading had arrived. The vet confirmed what their hearts already understood: Max's body was shutting down. And the most loving thing they could do was let him go with dignity, before his discomfort became suffering. They brought him home for one last day. They all sat with him in the backyard, Sarah, Michael, and Joshua, in the sunshine that Max had always loved. They fed him his favorite treats, told him stories about their adventures together, and thanked him for every moment he'd given them. Emma drove up from San Diego with Lily, now a teenager, who sat on the floor next to Max, stroking his head just as she had when she was 3 years old. "Thank you for always keeping me safe," Lily whispered, tears streaming down her cheeks. Max's tail gave one gentle thump in response. That final afternoon, Max rested his head in Sarah's lap, just as he had on that very first night 13 years ago. His breathing was peaceful. His eyes were calm. He looked at each member of his family, as if memorizing their faces, storing away these last precious moments. "You're such a good boy, Max," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "The very best boy." When evening came, they returned to the vet. Sarah held Max in her arms, Michael's hand on his head, and Joshua, brave 8-year-old Joshua, whispered all the things he loved about his best friend. The vet was gentle and kind, explaining each step with compassion. Max went peacefully, surrounded by all the love he'd given so freely throughout his life, his head still resting against Sarah's heart. Max passed away on a warm evening in May, just as the sun was setting over Los Angeles, the same city where his story had begun. He crossed the Rainbow Bridge with the same grace and dignity he'd shown throughout his life, leaving behind paw prints not just on the floors of the house, but on every heart he'd touched. In the days that followed, the house felt emptier than they could have imagined. There was no morning greeting, no gentle presence following them from room to room, no soft snoring from the corner of the room at night. But slowly, through the grief, they began to remember not just the loss, but the gift. Max had taught them about loyalty, how to show up for the people you love, day after day, without question or hesitation. He'd taught them about protection, not the fierce kind, but the gentle watching over that says, "I'm here, you're safe." He'd taught them about joy, the simple pleasure of a sunny spot, a good treat, a beloved toy, time with family. Most importantly, Max had taught them that love means being present through all of life's moments, the joyful ones and the difficult ones, the exciting ones and the ordinary ones. He'd shown them that the truest form of devotion is simply choosing to stay, to be there, to never give up on the ones who matter. Sarah kept Max's collar on her bedside table. Sometimes, in the quiet morning hours, she'd hold it and remember the sound of his tags jingling as he trot through the house. Michael found he could undelete the hundreds of photos and videos from his phone, each one a precious memory of a life well lived. And Joshua, wise beyond his years, told his parents that Max wasn't really gone. "He's still protecting us," Joshua said with certainty. "We just can't see him now." The family eventually adopted another dog, not to replace Max, because no dog ever could, but to honor his memory by giving another rescue dog the same chance at love that Max had received. But they never forgot the lessons Max taught them, or the profound impact one loyal, loving dog can have on the humans lucky enough to call him family. Max showed them that the bond between a human and a dog is one of life's greatest gifts, a relationship built on trust, sustained by love, and remembered long after the last goodbye. He proved that dogs don't just leave paw prints on our hearts. They leave lasting impressions on our souls, shaping who we become and how we love. Loving a pet means being there for them until the very end, just as they were there for us every single day of their lives. It means holding them close when it's time to let them go, and finding the courage to say goodbye even when it breaks our hearts. The pain of loss is profound, but it's also a testament to the depth of love shared. And that love, that pure, unconditional love, is worth every tear, every heartache, every moment of grief. Because for every moment of sorrow, at the end, there were countless moments of joy throughout the journey. Max was more than just a dog. He was a loyal protector, a gentle guardian, a devoted companion, and a beloved member of the family. His story began on a busy street in Los Angeles with an act of compassion, continued through 13 years of unwavering love, and ended with a peaceful farewell surrounded by the family who cherished him. But his legacy, the love he gave and the lessons he taught, will continue forever in the hearts of those who were blessed to know him. Rest peacefully, Max. Your job here is done, and you did it perfectly. Until we meet again at the Rainbow Bridge, know that you were, and always will be, the very best boy.